Well, it's one thing to make a charge, and it's another thing to understand what is behind the charge. By irresponsible spending, what they're really talking about is spending. And of course, one can always reduce expenditures for education in Dallas. This can be done, and every member of the board knows it. But of course, you would have to reduce teacher salaries. You would have to throw out the kindergarten system. You would have to drop out the new dropout prevention program. All of the fine improvements that are now being made in education would have to be discarded.
When you say the Committee for Good Schools as opposed to spending, are you accusing them of being regressive?
When you say they, you really ought to be saying he. Because the Committee for Good Schools, I suspect, can hold its annual meeting in a phone booth.
When you say he, who are you referring to?
Mr. John Stemmons.
But Wright told me in our telephone conversation this morning that in addition to the military cutbacks in personnel, there may be 2 or 3 actual base closings here in the state. One prominent possibility reportedly discussed by Defense Department evaluators is the Dallas Naval Air Station. The base was commissioned in May of 1941 and has been both an active and a reserve training base. At this time, there are around 750 Navy and Marine personnel on active duty status based here, responsible for the training of some 1,500 reservists. On the other side of the base is a 136th Air Refueling Squadron of the Air National Guard. If the axe does fall here, it probably would erase all but the Guard unit, or, in the interest of economy, the tanker squadron could be transferred to nearby Carswell Air Force Base in Fort Worth. The official announcement will come sometime Friday afternoon from Defense Secretary Melvin Laird.
Well, as a member of this community, I naturally do not like to see things that cutbacks or people transferred or any situation that causes people to leave our area. However, with regard to housing, I think it could definitely be an asset in that we do have a shortage of available housing for our people now due to the cost of construction, the inflation situation, tight money, and so on. And it would make much more housing available on equity transactions, that is, people selling property and new buyers assuming their loans at lower interest rates. And I think it will afford many people an opportunity to buy a nice home they're maybe living in an apartment now.
To answer that question, and reading this article in the paper here, this is the first notice we've had from this morning. Our chamber, the Fort Worth Chamber of Commerce, is vitally interested in our government's efforts to reduce expenditures. There's a basic policy, and although we're not very happy with the the effect that it has on our Carswell Air Force Base and our friends out there, it no doubt is all part of this national interest, and we accept these efforts to reduce expenditures.
With good low-cost housing difficult to find in many cases, Americans are turning more and more to the mobile home. Mobile home sales have skyrocketed in recent years as length and width restrictions have been eased, allowing more floor space for family living. With the increase in sales, it stands to reason there must be some place to park these homes on wheels, and that is the basis for a very controversial issue in Fort Worth. Fort Worth, like other cities, is attempting to regulate and plan for the proper development of mobile home parks. A proposed ordinance which covers that development is soon to be considered by the City Council, and that ordinance is under attack. Spokesmen for the Mobile Home Association of Tarrant County say the ordinance, if adopted as written, would force the closing of nearly 90% of the existing parks strictly because they were built long before this planning device was conceived. Most of the controversy comes from the installation of services and restrictions on spacing, ground clearance, and public utilities. The Mobile Home Association feels that in most cases, the park should comply with laws governing other single-family dwelling developments. They feel they are being discriminated against in areas where they should not be, and they feel existing state laws which govern the mobile home construction should be considered in writing this new ordinance. Action by City Council is not expected soon. An appointed committee has just reported to the Council the 16th of last month. This is Gene Thomas, Channel 8 News in Fort Worth.
Almost everyone has heard of Judge Roy Bean and the law west of the Pecos. Some have even heard of Judge Richburg and the law west of the Trinity. This is Woodland Hills, where they have the law west of Marks Branch. Marks Branch is a small stream which wanders through this little highway town of some 339 people on the outskirts of southwest Dallas. Also running through Woodland Hills for a distance of 9/10 of a mile is Highway 67. The story here revolves around this 9/10 of a mile, a radar unit, 3 part-time marshals, and a lot of irate motorists who complain of a strange type of roadside justice. One of those irate motorists is James Tingle, who runs a trailer manufacturing business on Highway 67. I understand you have been stopped by the Woodland Hills Police Department on a couple of occasions.
Yes, sir, they stopped me 3 times. The first time was for a damaged automobile that I'd had, and I was issued a citation for no license plate. During this time that he issued me this citation, he cursed several times in front of my wife, which I didn't appreciate at all.
I understand you have observed the techniques and methods of the Woodland Hills officers in setting up their radar unit. In fact, that they set it up out in front of your driveway. What did you find? What have you seen?
Well, they work 1 or 2 days a week, maybe 3 days at the most, and that they'll work about 1 or 2 hours of the evening, and they just set up out here and run about as many tickets as they can run during that time and then leave. At one evening out here, I observed them stopping cars on average of 1 every 6 minutes.
A number of things about the Woodland Hills traffic operation seem to irritate people who have complained to me. One is the fact that Woodland Hills officers often work in their street clothes and chase down motorists in their personal cars. Another is that upon stopping someone, they collect bail money on the side of the road. Still another is the fact that a 16-year-old boy has been helping the marshal man the speed traps. One officer from another department told me he once saw the boy wearing a gun, but that was some time ago before all the complaints began. Woodland Hills officials say they're only trying to slow down the traffic on the narrow, heavily traveled highway. However, it doesn't appear from my observations that Woodland Hills really has that much of a traffic problem. Over the past 4 years, there have been only about 10 accidents a year on Highway 67 in Woodland Hills, and most of those were minor. Meanwhile, while the Woodland Hills law enforcement team wrote tickets, someone broke into the City Hall the other night and took all the office machines. This is Tommy Ayers reporting for Channel 8 News.
could not say. I wouldn't want to prejudge what the judge would want to judge for himself as judge.
Did you make any discussion on personnel matters, and does your adoption of the report make any reference to specific firings of the well-known people that have made it?
No, it does not. It does not.
How about this note from the Committee of 17 that came in by way of Daisy White? Was this discussed during the closed meeting?
Yes.
And
yes,
what was
yes.
this at?
Well, we're trying to. This has to do with the election of target area people and the selection of the community organization. We're trying to work out some specifics on that to be responsive to that.
There's been a lot said about Ed Polk and Ruth Jefferson. During your closed hearings, has this come into the conversation?
Not at all. Not at all. Not a bit.
We're kind of in the dark at this time as to what the motive is. We don't have a suspect at this time. At this time, it looks like that Dr. McKee just went in on a burglar. This is one possible thing that happened, and but we're trying not to overlook anything. We don't have a motive at this time, like I've already said, and we're just talking to people, trying to find out what did happen.
Well, they were concerned mainly about the safety of the students in the area. There are students on buses in the halls of this building, in the business establishments in and around the area, because some of these little conflicts have arisen in the past.
Were they satisfied? Does this satisfy the parents of these groups? Did they seem to be satisfied as a result of?
I think they seem to be satisfied with the general outcome of the meeting, although some of them are still somewhat upset over the fact that their students might have been somewhat assaulted or attacked.
The new administration differs with the original type of architectural plans that were drawn up. And some of our people say they like the idea of a high-rise. They were excellent plans, but it was a concept. They had a high-rise building, and the new administration wants to have a big one-story type of a facility. Now, my own thinking is let's get the $26.5 million authorized and through the budget. And the Oak Cliff Chamber of Commerce, the Dallas Chamber, the Irving Chamber, everybody favors the idea of let's get in that regional post office built right out there on that wonderful 40-acre site that we have out there. But and then let's get around to decide on what they're going to do in the way they design it.
Over 12,000 Baptist Church-related musicians are gathered here at the Tarrant County Convention Center for what they call the Festival of Praise. It's a marathon music festival that lasts into the late evening hours, perhaps into the early morning hours, this evening and tomorrow morning. Don Husted of Southern Seminary is the conductor. At the moment, you hear in the background the well-known and well-beloved Hallelujah Chorus. Let's listen to the music.
Well, the basic rays that we see that are associated with the time of totality happens to be that we refer to as the flash spectrum. Now, the flash spectrum is only seen during totality, and what we're looking at then is the low-pressure gas that surrounds the actual surface of the sun. In other words, the true atmosphere of the sun. Then, of course, sticking out along the outside of it would be something like this. Of course, if this were totality, we'd see the remarkable corona, and no two eclipses are alike, of course, but what I'm referring to here is this outer ridge here that sticks out along the outside. This area right here is the true atmosphere of the sun. It's called the chromosphere, and it's that part that we can actually study. And no other time, of course, except when the moon covers the disk, do we see this thin atmosphere around the outside. And we can study the composition of it, of course, and the characteristics of it. It's that part that we expect, I hope, this time to obtain, let's say, a motion picture series of the flash spectrum of the sun during the time of this totality.
It would be my hope that we could hold the House seats and that we could perhaps pick up some. Being very realistic and very honest with you, I'd like to think we could pick up the needed 30 plus what we now hold. But our big trouble is that so many of the people are leaving safe seats and seeking other seats, gubernatorial seats or seats in the Senate. And as soon as you leave a safe seat, a so-called safe seat, where one man has done a good job, then you're in peril in that area unless you have an equally good person to go back in. So there is a risk there, and it's very difficult then to hold your base and still build 30 on top. It's possible. And if the mood of the people is the same as it is right now, I think it's very possible. But I do see us picking up the Senate.
About 90 Dallas women bankers held a study session this morning in a hotel room decorated with pictures of the Old West. But their topic was far from the Old West. It was, in fact, the New West and the role of women in Texas. The three guest speakers were three of the Dallas members of the newly created Governor's Commission on the Status of Women. One of those commission members is Anita Marcus.
We're reared in a sort of attitude, a society which was probably quite apropos to the past, that you get married, you have your children, and you live happily ever after. Of course, when we find that a great percentage of the labor force, in fact, 1/3 of the labor force today in America is made up of women, and it's growing, and millions of women with children are working, and millions more might, that this is no longer a realistic attitude. So that we need this guidance and counseling specially designed for women from children, and that we also have got to question the attitudes which have been handed down to us from an earlier society that are no longer with it in the 70s and for the last third of this exciting 20th century.
They said because of low ratings. However, the ratings were fine. As a matter of fact, we had tied Merv Griffin the week before. We had beaten him a few weeks before that. And we did that with 50 fewer stations than MERV has. You see, NBC, as you know, is about 205 stations, and CBS is about 190 or so, and we have on the ABC network about 144. They said low ratings. However, it's difficult to really understand how low they mean, because, as I said, we were tied for second place.
Do you yourself think it was treated rather unfairly?
Well, in a sense that it was never really explained why to the public or to us. In that sense, it was unfairly. But, you know, shows come and go. And to cry over a show that has had a 3-year run, after all, 3 years is a long time, I doubt very much if any late-night show will last that long against Johnny Carson.
As the activities of the Status of Women's Commission, are they part of some kind of feminist movement or the women's right movement or the no bra movement or whatever?
My estimation, some of these movements may have been influenced by the status on the Commission of Women, but I don't think they relate quite so closely. The first commission was appointed by President Kennedy some years ago to assess the role of women in society. I think where I would differ from I personally would differ from some of the women's rights group. Certainly, basically, we all believe a woman should be judged as an individual to develop her capacities, whether it's housewife and mother, professionally, and what other area. But I don't believe that there is any necessity to sacrifice what we would call our femininity to achieve any sort of role that we might visualize for developing our human resources in our country.
To resign as National Committee man so that he could, in effect, have some influence in the reappointment of the next person.
No, that rumor was not of LBJ. That it was. I saw it quoted in the paper this morning that the governor wanted me to do so, but I've heard nothing about that. The governor never suggested that to me, and so far as I know, Governor Smith's very pleased that I have this new post. And matter of fact, I expect to see him tomorrow in San Antonio at the State Democratic Executive Committee meeting.
How do you plan to get the Democrats out of debt? Was it $8 million plus? Do you have any formulas now?
Oh, no, Teal. I have no magic wand, no formulas. I'll solicit you for contributions to start off with.
Lloyd Benson is on the campaign trail. He has a formidable opponent, and he knows it. He's no newcomer to politics, so he elected to begin his effort to take over Senator Ralph Yarbrough's seat here in the Rio Grande Valley, where he grew up, where he got his first political job as a 25-year-old lawyer. He became a county judge here. He has served this area from Congress. He says he's going to bring a new kind of politics that will serve not only the people of the Rio Grande Valley, but all the people of Texas. Now, here in the lower Rio Grande Valley, of course, you're talking primarily to the people of this area, and you're talking about their problems. Should you be elected, you've got problems like Laos to deal with. How do you feel about the situation there? Would you put American troops in there? Would you vote for that under any circumstance?
Well, you put the words under any circumstance. At the moment, I can't think of any circumstance where I would agree to put American troops into Laos. To be involved in a ground war in Asia, we can see as something that is almost without end, and we are trying our utmost to get out of there now.
Benson, like all politicians, says he's going to carry the state and he's going to win in a landslide, but he says the way he's going to start is by getting 50% of the vote from San Antonio South. He's making an effort to do that now. Jerry Taft, Channel 8 News, with the Benson Party in the Rio Grande Valley.
Are you personally opposed to the concept of a new city hall, and how do you answer critics who say that you were just making these charges or complaining about this out of just pure political motives?
I have no expertise in the architectural field. There are many people who criticize the design. I have not criticized the design of the building because, to me,
If the building is functional and it can be built within what the people voted, well, I'm going to vote to build the building. Yes, the statement has been made that anyone who speaks out against building the City Hall will be automatically considered to be political in nature. These charges aren't new, and in fact, some of the people making the charges are making them in a political vein. Certain people have spoken out in Dallas, and one comes to mind, the financial consultant for the First National Bank is certainly not political in nature, and he's one of the most vocal critics, or has been during the past, about spending public funds beyond the amount approved by the voters. As projected, the $10 million needed to additional money over and above what the voters approved would have to be funded some way, and I think the public should be involved in the decision on that amount of money.
Does most of your criticism boil down to a charge that the city fathers sold one project to the public a couple of years ago and then elaborated on it as they perhaps felt they needed or saw fit, and are really building another thing now?
I'd say a portion of the extra cost is because of increased material and labor, certainly. But there are other things that have been brought into the picture that were not considered by the voters in '67. And whether or not the cost is there will be known when the bids are open, but still, I'm insisting that if it goes above the amount approved by the voters, that the voters have a second shot at it.
I don't think the conservative strength is in any way diluted, as a matter of fact, but I think it may bring us one step nearer that day when conservatives are going to have to join forces. I don't think they're any longer going to be able to afford the luxury of conservative Democrats competing with Republicans, if you like. I think it's going to tend to polarize the situation here, and I don't know that that's necessarily bad.
How is this going to affect your campaign or your chances of winning this predicted increase?
Not in the least. In the first place, I anticipated that this was going on, that heavy-handed registration drives, if you like, were underway in particular sections of the county. I wasn't particularly surprised when several days after the registration deadline, we were told in our papers, literally thousands of registrations flooded into the tax assessor collector's office. I would have bet you a hat at that point that the great majority of those registrations came from one or two particular areas in the county that had been assiduously worked by people looking to their own political advantage, and I can't blame them for that.
I've been on record consistently since I was elected national committeeman, stay out of that type of race. And with respect to the Yarborough-Benson race, why, I think I've specifically been on record 2 or 3 times that I know both of them. I'm going to take no involvement in that race, and the one that comes out of that primary of the winner, well, I'll campaign all over Texas for it and try to get him elected or re-elected, as the case might be.